Yeah, let's do it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first AI safety webinar, using AI tools responsibly. My name is Mac. I'm a learning manager at the Raspberry Pi Foundation, and I worked on the AI safety materials that these webinars are all about. And I'm thrilled that you're joining us today, whether you are from one of our partner organizations, an educator who sort of taught some Experience AI lessons or taught no Experience AI lessons at all, or a parent or a club leader who's just interested in finding out how to encourage young people to use AI tools more responsibly. I'm joined today by my colleague, Ben. Would you like to introduce yourself, Ben?
Yes, hello everybody. I am Ben Garside and I lead our AI literacy team at the Raspberry Pi Foundation.
Amazing. And Ben, for those who don't know, would you like to introduce Experience AI?
I'd love to, Mark. Thank you. So for those who don't know, Experience AI is a set of classroom and resources for teachers and students. And it's an educational program that teaches young people about AI literacy skills. Primarily, we aim these at 11 to 14-year-olds, but these are foundational resources. Don't feel too restricted by their age group. It's just where we've targeted our resources at. Now, Mac, I've got some really cool stats that I'm super pleased about with Experience AI. So we know that Experience AI is being used globally. We've had lots of countries across the world using our resources. And to put that into context, we have translated our resources into 23 different languages. So if you visit our website, you can go to languages at the top, and hopefully you'll be able to find your language there as well, and find all of our learning resources translated and localized as well for each of the different languages and countries. And I checked this morning, and we have estimated that we are reaching over 1.5 million students globally. There's the amount of students who are being reached by our Experience AI resources. So that's really exciting. So just being part of this, you're being part of something that is reaching so many students across the world.
Yeah, amazing. And those numbers always blow my mind. So what are these Experience AI resources? Do you want to give a quick rundown?
Yes. So we have a Foundations of AI unit of work. This is a 6-lesson unit of work. It's teacher-led. We also have a single lesson on large language models. So we have a lesson that's broken down into 10-minute chunks to give you a bit of flexibility about how you might deliver that lesson. But it's essentially teaching young people to be critical thinkers about generative AI, particularly around large language models. So what I mean by that is things like Google Gemini or ChatGPT. We have a single lesson on ecosystems and AI. So that's seeing the applicability of AI tools and how we can use them to solve problems that don't just exist in computer science, but also exist in other realms such as biology or geography, for example. And then today we are here to talk about our AI safety lessons. So Mac, I'll pass over to you to describe that.
Amazing. So AI safety is our newest set of resources. We released them just earlier this year. And as Ben said, we translate all of our resources into 23 languages. So we're just in the process of translating these into all of those languages. So these, either they'll be ready now or they'll be coming soon. But AI safety is a unit that's been created to support people around the world, educators, club leaders, parents, and carers, to help have conversations with young people about how to use AI safely. Each of the sessions revolves around a key sort of e-safety, digital citizenship concept. And then we use that to explore how AI might change the ways we think about that, right? So we have like data privacy, for example. We have media literacy and misinformation. And what we're going to be covering today in this webinar is this idea of using AI tools responsibly, right? So we've already spoken a lot with people about using digital tools responsibly, but how might we have to augment or change those conversations when we're talking about AI tools? Now, it's not just going to be me and Ben talking about this, although we could talk about this all day. We're also very excited to say that we are joined by a very special guest, Amy Currier-Blair from Google, who brings expertise on how platforms think about encouraging responsible use of AI tools. We'll bring Amy onto the stage. Hello, Amy. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Mac and Bennett. I'm excited to be here with you guys.
No worries. If you could introduce yourself a little bit and tell the people about your role at Google.
Yes, of course. So I'm a product manager at Google, and I work on a responsible AI product strategy for youth. Youth in this context is meaning users, all users under the age of 18. I've worked at Google and other Google affiliates like YouTube in this capacity and adjacent capacities for just over the last 12 years, which is crazy to think. And I have nearly 20 years of experience working in media and tech for children. I actually started my career in children's book publishing, which is kind of a fun fact. And for me, it's been neat to see how words have become such a focal point in innovative technology with AI and LLM. So that's kind of an interesting full circle moment for me. In my day-to-day, though, I work with many of our PAs like Gemini, Search, YouTube, Pixel, Labs, really across the company, as well as with a lot of expert third-party groups such as yourselves and others, ultimately advising the company on how to build our AI products with the best interest of children at the forefront. I spent a lot of time with child development experts and research organizations across Google and DeepMind on how emerging tech and AI uniquely impacts youth in a way that is different from adults, both from a risk and an opportunity perspective. So what are the good, what are the bad? And the types of things that my team builds can range from product strategies and research-backed policies and AI literacy resources that products can leverage in their product design lifecycle, to actually building some of the safety infrastructure and algorithmic improvement that goes into our model functionality that not only protects youth by removing the bad, but also elevates the good. I'm also a mom of two little ones, ages 4 and 5. So, my career in the space laps around my tenure as a parent, but I'm really happy to have both daily reminders as to why this space is so important. So really excited to be here with you all talking about it, and excited that we have such a great crew that is interested in the topic, because it is very important.
Amazing. Thank you, Amy. That's so exciting. And obviously you have this kind of huge wealth of expertise. And I'm really excited to sort of talk to you about some of these topics, particularly because I think, from our conversations we had in preparation for this, it's clear that you really think about this every day from that sort of platform side. And hopefully we can give all the people watching some really great stuff to talk to young people about, and to help encourage them to think about responsible use of AI. Now, throughout the webinar, Amy, we're going to bring you kind of onto the stage to offer some of that expertise. Throughout, and we're going to, at the end, we'll have a sort of longer conversation where we can really dive into some of your experience and how some recommendations you maybe have for both young people for what they can do and what they should expect from platforms. So we'll see you in a little bit, Amy.
Sounds good.
Cool. Now, the AI safety lessons are sort of separate from everything else we've done. So Ben introduced the rest of the lessons that we had. So the idea here is that you shouldn't have had to have done the Foundations of AI unit to go on to AI safety. They should be independent. Each of the sessions themselves are independent of each other as well. So really, it is designed to put as much choice in your hands as possible. These resources are also modular, right? So there's these 3 components, right? We have a central video that it is recommended that everybody watch. This introduces the sort of digital safety topic. It introduces a key concept in AI literacy, and then it kicks off some interesting conversations to have for the rest of the session. Following that, you can do one of our 2 unplugged activities, or you could use some of our discussion points to sort of have some more in-depth discussions with young people. Now, we'll see a little bit more about how that works as we go through the webinar. So today's webinar is all about using AI tools responsibly. So we're going to talk a lot about how it's important to view AI as a tool, not as a person. We're going to talk about the dual responsibilities of both users, developers, and also us as educators in preparing young people to use AI tools responsibly. We're going to look at our 2 unplugged activities from this session, so the Check AI Challenge and My AI Principles. And Amy will be offering us some insights on the considerations of how using AI tools responsibly, how platforms think about them. Really excited to dive into it. So as we said, these sessions all revolve around a sort of key e-safety digital citizenship topic. So this one is all about digital citizenship. And we already teach young people about, respectful online behavior before, outside of AI tools. We teach them about respectful online behavior. We talk about how to avoid plagiarism and use sources online responsibly. We talk about how to protect personal data and thinking critically about the sort of veracity, the truthfulness of information that they see. Now, all of this stuff is around using digital tools, right? And we have these principles set up for tools. Now, what's tricky or can be tricky with AI systems sometimes is that they're presented as sort of more human than they actually are. So, it's important to remind young people that these are tools and not people. And I think to kick off that sort of conversation in this webinar, we're going to watch the video that kicks off this session.
Technology can help people get more done, stay connected with friends, and make parts of life easier. But while AI tools can be helpful and useful, it is also important to consider how to use them safely and responsibly. The developers of AI systems want them to be easy to use, approachable, and user-friendly. The media around AI and the user-friendly interfaces can make AI systems look and sound more human than they actually are. For example, marketing campaigns might represent AI systems with smiley human-like robots. Or when chatbots seem very human in their responses. Some AI systems are given realistic human voices. But AI systems are just another computer program, and they cannot think, feel, or understand. When someone uses an AI application, they should remember they are using a tool and are responsible for how they use it. Technology should empower you, but you still need to stop and think about how you use those powers. If someone uses an AI application to create a video of another person without their permission, even if the system allows it, the creator is responsible for their actions. There might be legal consequences to the use of an AI tool. There can be enormous benefits for society from using AI tools, but we need to decide when and where it is appropriate to use them. Rules that apply in everyday life, like not copying someone else's work, still apply when using AI tools. AI systems might be biased, where the output impacts a certain group of people differently to others, in unfair ways. When someone uses an AI tool, they should think carefully about who it will affect to make sure they're not causing harm. Developers making the AI applications also bear responsibility to help avoid harm. They need to make sure the system is fair and should be accountable to users. You should expect transparency from developers, being open and honest about where an AI system is used and what happens to your data. You are growing into a world that will be shaped by the use of AI across society. Building a set of principles for using AI responsibly will help create a world that harnesses the benefits of AI, whilst reducing any potential harm. What safeguards should companies put in place if an AI tool is aimed at young people? How will you make sure you use these tools safely and responsibly?
Amazing. So that is the video that sort of kicks off this whole session. We're really, really proud of them. And as mentioned before, these resources are translated into 23 languages. And each of those languages has a fully voiceover version of that video in the local language. So really, really excited to be able to bring video content to people around the world in their local language with both captions and a fully translated voiceover track. Cool. So those just some key ideas from that video, right? The idea of these videos is to kick off some conversation. So I think the two things we want to pull out from that is that AI systems are still tools, even though they appear to be very powerful or can be presented as maybe more human than they actually are. And we need to establish these acceptable uses of them, just like any other tool, right? We talk about safety when using a hammer. We should talk about safety when using AI tools. And this idea of shared responsibility, right? That users have a responsibility to use AI tools wisely, but developers have a responsibility to ensure that their tools are used responsibly and that they put safeguards in place. So Ben, I wondered if you had some ideas about how we can support young people to become better, informed and ethical users of technology.
Right, and I think that's a big question, right? And I think that's the whole point of these resources, right? I think that's what we're trying to achieve with our AI safety resources. But, if you want my take on it, I think if you're asking the question, what does it mean to be better informed? I think it means empowering young people to just be able to make informed, but importantly, deliberate choices. And I think that word that choices word is pretty important, and I think whether you're an educator, what I mean by educator, I suppose, is a classroom teacher, somebody who interacts regularly with young people, a parent. I think that's what I mean by an educator. And I think what our responsibility is to create this kind of environment where we can have these kind of debates around some of these ethical dilemmas, and so that we're able to evaluate both sides of the argument, right? It's not about telling people what is right and wrong. It's about seeing both sides. So hopefully, I think young people can, we equip them to make the choices that they think are appropriate and they think are right. So I think ultimately all these things is teaching young people to be critical thinkers. And I think that skill of being a critical thinker is probably the most important thing we can do at the moment in the world of AI. So actually tees me up nicely, doesn't it? I think, Mac, to the next set of...
Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
So critical thinking, I think this is something that we feel so passionate about at the Raspberry Pi Foundation around this term anthropomorphism. And what that term actually means, it means is when we as human beings allocate these human-like characteristics at things that aren't human beings. And we do this a lot as human beings. I think it's just part of our natural being to kind of give, things that aren't human, these personalities. If you've got a pet at home, you probably speak to it just like it's a human being, like I do. But equally, we see this all the time. We see this in media, you see this on children's television shows. You might get like cars that can like talk and solve crimes. But actually, I think in the past, I think we've kind of been we've been very comfortable with that and think this is actually not the terrible thing to do, because we know that these cars can't actually talk or solve crimes. I think where it starts to become a bit of a problem is now we're developing these systems that portray these human-like qualities, and in case it becomes a little bit more confusing to determine what is human and what isn't. So, for example, you can see these images here of these kind of human-like robots. They've got these eyes and they're like human-like face. So what does that mean for young people growing up in the world where all these things are around them? And what does that do to their idea of how the world works? So this is why we think you should avoid anthropomorphism. And actually, it's not just us. This is all based on research. So the research says these are the dangers of anthropomorphizing. And one of them is, or these two together, is this leading to students seeing AI systems as people rather than tools. And what that actually results in them developing these incorrect mental models about how they actually work. So, for example, we know that if young people see them as human-like or start thinking of them like, oh, I don't know, Google Gemini, ChatGPT, it understood what I meant. It can read my emotions. It can support me with my mental health. Then what we're doing there is actually stopping or restricting young people to see these things as human-made tools, wanting to actually lift the lid and try and understand how they work, and importantly, be involved in the development of these systems in the future. And these last two I kind of combine as well, this shifting responsibility away from the fact it's people who make these systems. So if we see them as human-like, I think the research shows that young people don't kind of forget the fact that people make these and therefore are responsible for how they work. And all these things combined lead to this potential danger of increasing racism and gender bias in society, as these systems are often seen as white and male. And the two examples that I often give around this that kind of bring these things to life is that last summer there was this AI beauty contest created, where they use AI models to create these females to enter into this beauty pageant. You might have your own feelings about how beauty pageants, the morals behind that anyway. But the fact that people are now creating systems to make not real human beings, how does that make young people feel, particularly young women feel? And it's interesting because the winner of that competition is also given a persona, and they release YouTube videos of this character online, and they've been described as a social media influencer. So really what we want is young people, these critical thinkers, to understand that humans have made these things, and maybe who were they trying to influence that they couldn't have done before they actually created a fake human being. And the other example was there was an AI system out there that was designed to deliberately develop a persona to act like a fantasy character from a television show. So you could choose which character you wanted to interact with. Now, there's a story, unfortunately, of a young man who interacted with one of these characters and expressed these suicidal thoughts. Now, unfortunately, because this is AI and it's randomly generating responses, the character encouraged this young man to go ahead and commit suicide, and unfortunately they did. Now, we can't be sure that the fact is they really understood this as fact, this was a human being, this wasn't a human being, sorry, that they wouldn't have done this anyway. But we know that if like these are the extreme dangers, and it's helping young people understand that these systems that they're growing up around them, that they're interacting with, you know, aren't actually human beings. They've got like a smart assistant in their home. You know, for us, we that it's not a human being, but what do young people think if this is part of their norm? So moving on to the next slide, how do we avoid this? I think the advice that we give to people is we try as educationalists to try and be so careful with our language. So rather than saying things like AI learns or AI understands, we're saying these developers build systems that do these things, or applications are designed to, just putting a human in that loop. Rather than using these kind of common language that we hear around these technologies of, you know, it looks, it sees, it listens. We're not using that human-like language. We're just shifting away to a slight technical language. So rather than saying see, look, recognize, we're saying record, input, pattern, match. And again, we're avoiding using AI as a countable noun, like the AI. As soon as we start saying the AI, we're putting this kind of ownership or away from the human being. And we're saying that this system is, you know, self-deterministic, and it can is responsible for their own decisions. So this is hard to do. I don't think anybody should give themselves a hard time to anthropomorphize. But we know as educationalists, as when we speak to young people, if you hear them using some of this language, just maybe question it. If they say, oh, the large language model, it understood what I meant. I think just having these conversations such as, do you think it understood? I think that's a good starting point. So Mark, over to you.
You know, we do this directly in this using AI tools responsibly. So as a follow-up to that video, we have them look at this description of an AI application here, right? Saying the AI application sees the shape of a fruit and tells you what it is. Or I let an AI application create images for art class, right? So this language that, again, just puts more agency on the AI system than maybe they should, doesn't put the human in the equation. We just have them correct them, right? So we have them think about what they've just heard, to reflect on that idea of seeing AI as a system, as a tool, rather than as a person, and correct some of the language, right? So switching out C's for analyzes, switching out tells for outputs. I'm saying instead of I let an AI application, is saying I used an AI application, and being clear about what you are doing. Cool. Now, that's a lot of hearing me and Ben talk about this, but I think, you know, importantly, there are lots of people inside of tech organizations, AI developers, that are thinking about this stuff every day. And we have one of them with us right now. So I'm going to bring Amy back if possible. Hello, Amy.
Hello.
Just wanted to sort of get your expertise on this, your thoughts on this. Like, how do you think about, you know, how does viewing an AI system as a tool rather than a sentient being help empower young people, right? What does this idea of framing them as tools do for people?
Yes, and you guys hit on such really good points, I think, around the risks of anthropomorphization and what that means for a child, and why it's important to discern between the technical implementation of an AI system and what a human can do. I'm going to talk a little bit about it from a different angle, I think, too, just to kind of round it all out. And I think it also is important to talk about who we are addressing. For our youngest users, the age difference matters so much. So users around 3 to 5, 3 to 6, they're going to have a really hard time knowing the difference between a human and a bot to begin with. That's going to be really challenging. And this isn't something that's new newly introduced with AI. It's been a long-standing issue, beginning with things like smart speakers and device assistants in the home. But AI does change the game. And so I'll talk more about teens in a second, but I think just also leading with the flag that once a child is developmentally able to make that distinction between a computer or a bot and a human, the conversational nature of AI chatbots may be distracting from building that understanding. And so that's really where our role as humans comes in as well. Also, as whether you're a teacher, parent, or a developer, starting the education early is important, but continuing to reinforce it. So as they make those different leaps, it is important that we're not thinking of this like this not a human differentiation as they learn it once life lesson. It's something to just kind of continue to reinforce and to think about addressing at their different ages and stages. And for our youngest users, one of my an expert advisor I work with very closely, whom I love hearing how she thinks about these things. She told me that for the youngest kids, tell them that if it can't pee, it's not real. And I thought that was such a really helpful and kind of funny anecdote, but it is very impactful. Like, all jokes aside, it's one of those things that just is a really easy mnemonic device for them to be able to think about. But
I think we'll stick with them.
Yeah. We'll stick with them. Stuck with me. But it's a good way to get them giggling about it. But for teens and older kids, I think that we obviously need them to remain vigilant about their healthy tech use in a way we need to with any tech product. But for example, like looking out for signs of anxiety if it's not accessible, or ensuring that the teen has diverse interests and is becoming more socially independent as the years go on and not less. These are things that we need to do with any tech use, and AI is no exception. But I want to talk about something that I think is a little bit less around just the emphasis that it's not a human, because if it acts like a human sometimes and it sounds like a human sometimes, I think the knowledge of knowing merely that it's not a human is not giving full credit to how people just naturally internalize these things. And so I think it's important that we don't that we offer the not just it's not human, but we remind teens why they are human. I guess making sure that we don't drive undue anxiety in our younger generations. I spend a lot of time listening to teens and kids talk about AI, and parents, and they talk about the opportunities and what they're excited about, but they also talk about what they're afraid of and their anxieties. And I do hear a lot of them talk about how they're worried that in the future these things may be more valuable than they are. They may take jobs. They may be able to do things better than they are. And the reality is that an AI as a standalone object is not going to replace like the really amazing and unique value that a teen brings to society. And so I think that we as adults in their lives and the mentors in their lives really need to be constantly reminding them of these things. Like, I'm afraid of teens some days. They can be scary people, but they still need affirmation from the humans around them that they bring unique value to the world. And so finding those moments to uncover that with them is very important. And probably one of the best things that we can do in order to reassure them that they are not humans. I read a report that I thought was cool recently. It was actually from OpenAI, and they had a pretty extensive study around physicians with AI models versus physicians as standalone versus physicians with the internet. And simply put, the physician plus the model, the AI model together was the most effective. And I'm sorry, it wasn't the physician standalone, it was the model standalone. I'm sorry, that's an important distinction. And the model did leaps and bounds better than the model as a standalone, thing in the medical space. And so just reminding teens, especially, that it is not AI that's going to be the superpower, but it's the human who's learned how to use AI responsibly and effectively to augment what their unique intelligence and value is in the world. That's going to be the powerful opportunity for them in the future. And not to totally go on a tangent here, but I could talk to you all for hours on this. I am also excited about this, which is that we often see in the industry and headlines and different capacities that There are risks associated with AI around emotional like dependency, right? And don't get me wrong, we have to be looking into that, and we are all the time. The folks who have probably joined this call collectively have so much experience and expertise in developmental science. But I think that we can, when we also give it justice, to look at two sides of the same coin, which is that this probably actually at the end of the day isn't emotional dependency, but we are talking about attachment. And attachment for a child has a lot of net positives for a child, but it's in the nuance of, is it secure versus insecure? There's a lot more to learn and uncover here about actually how we can learn from how young people develop with being surrounded by humans and apply those things to make sure that we are tackling AI responsibly in the face of that. And so I'm excited to explore both sides of that coin and really understand how what we know about great human relationships and insecure human relationships can also advise how we think about AI literacy and teaching kids more about the differentiation between human and machine.
Amazing. Thank you, Amy. And I know you say you can talk to us for hours, but I think I speak for all of us. So I could listen to you talk about this stuff for hours, because I think you have such an interesting perspective on it all and such a wide-ranging expertise. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll what we're going to do is, I think I want to continue on this conversation later. So we're going to look at the resources now, and then I might bring you back. So I know I had another question lined up, but I think we sort of hit on some of the points there throughout both of them. So what I might do is I might take you off, we'll look at the resources, and then we'll bring you back at the end, and we'll have a really nice conversation around all of that stuff and hit all of those points. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in a second. Cool. So as we said, these resources, so the using AI tools responsibly session, right, is a modular session, right? So we had that video that we all watched, and then we wanted to give people some choice, right? We wanted to give people some choice in how they conduct these conversations, because we're aware that not everyone has the same context, the same amount of time, the same expertise, maybe in education or comfort talking about these technical concepts. So what we mean by being modular is everybody starts with watching the video. You could then go on to complete one of our 2 unplugged activities, which we're going to explore in just a second. Or if you don't want to do those, you not have a whole classroom full of people, we also have some nice discussion points that you can use to talk with young people. And these resources are not just about reflecting inwards in what young people are doing and how they can use tools responsibly, but also about looking outwards, right? And talking and looking at developers and becoming advocates for your own AI safety too, and making sure that these tools that you're using are have these safeguards built in, that you're happy with the ethics of the things that goes on behind them. So it's also about what should young people expect from these AI tools aimed at teens, which we're going to dive into with Amy a bit later, because she's got some great stuff to share on that. So let's talk a little bit about these resources. So as we said, we've got these 2 unplugged activities, which means that there is no technology required. We want to make sure that as many people as possible can access these resources. And we're aware also that if you have a room full of 11-year-olds and you say, let's talk about how you're going to use AI responsibly, then you might get met with a lot of silence. And so we wanted to introduce some unplugged activities that allow these conversations to come up really naturally. And so we think it's a really effective tool for sort of encouraging conversation with getting hands-on with the topics. And of course, as with so many of our resources, we bake these pedagogies that we know are effective in, such as semantic waves, which is this sort of way of tackling technical concepts where you sort of break them down to a sort of concrete, understandable, less abstract version, and then build it back up to help understand and help provide a full view of a technical concept. And then, as always, we have these, these other pedagogical principles that sort of build into all experience AI resources. So we always lead with concepts. So we start with a concept first and then allow people to get hands-on, because we think that means that they know what they're looking for while exploring it. And Ben, do you want to talk about work together?
Yeah. So working together essentially means the principle of it is not kind of leading this kind of lecture style approach of us, students come to the classroom and the teacher talks for an hour. It's really just providing those opportunities for collaboration and sharing ideas. And if you follow the link there, you'll see some more guidance around this, but we have techniques such as think, pair, share, as students think about it. They pair with someone next to them and they share it amongst the wider group. Or peer instructions, where we get to know what students think at the beginning. We debate it as a class and then decide at the end if anybody changed their mind or got a new view on anything.
Yeah, and as we said, we have that unpack, unplug, and repack, right? So that's that semantic wave. Again, it's about breaking down these concepts and allowing people to get hands-on before we repack up to this more abstract and complete view.
And challenging misconceptions is when we try and, well, it's challenging things that we think students might be forming these incorrect ideas about how these things work. And AI, teaching about AI is new. So, you know, there's just emerging research about what those kind of misconceptions might be around AI, but it's challenging those things that we talked about before. We hear the language about young people seeing these things as human beings. You know, maybe they think, you pick up on the idea that they think these AI systems have emotions or thought or intent, then it's kind of challenging that. Or maybe, for example, seeing AI systems as always being right. That's quite a common one that we come across. So again, it's just challenging that idea that they make predictions and they're not always correct.
Yeah, and absolutely. And most importantly, we make all of this stuff as concrete as possible by using examples that are relevant to the young people that we are teaching to, whether that be relevant in the sense of, you know, involved in their lives, but also culturally relevant, which is why we work with our amazing partner organizations to make sure all of our resources are localized. The examples will be relevant to every young person taking them. And yeah, follow that link. It's been put in the comments as well. To read more about this. And also in the educator guide, you will find some discussion guidance, right? So we know that having discussions with young people is not something that everybody will be sort of comfortable with, or, you know, capable, or feel like they've got confidence in doing. So we provide some sort of pedagogy, some things that you can use to really pull out some of these conversations. Like Ben mentioned, think, pair, share. We've also got some debate styles, right? So stand where I stand debates and jigsaw activities. All of these are really expanded on in the educator guide to help you kind of choose a format for your discussions that you think will work for your context, for the young people you're working with. Cool. Now we're going to go through the Unplugged activities. So we're going to have a look through what the Unplugged activities involve. So the first one is the Check AI challenge. So this is an escape room where young people are trying out for a fictional sort of AI ethics organization called Check AI. And it's their job to tackle 3 separate challenges all around sort of uses of AI that maybe are a little inappropriate, and spotting either some errors and thinking about how they would do things differently. So really getting hands-on and experiencing some of the ways AI might be used irresponsibly so that they can internalize why they won't do that. The first challenge is around using AI-generated images to create fake accounts, right? This is a big issue. You know, of using generative AI in ways to try and fool people, whether that be through deep fakes or through, as Ben said, these sort of beauty pageant AI influencers that are not real. So the idea here is that young people are challenged with spotting the fake AI generated images, right? And we know that this is really difficult. And the point is that it is really difficult. But there's a game to this. They get to make guesses and find out how many they've got correct, but not maybe which ones are correct. And so we get to sort of gamify this a little bit. But really, this is an idea of having them reflect on whether this is an appropriate use of AI, whether they think that, you know, this is something that should be done or should be protected against. And also have them think a little bit about what they would want from platforms to make AI-generated images easier to identify, whether that be watermarking them or having little marks on platforms. Just give them a chance to really confront that issue. Challenge 2 is about this idea of finding errors in LLM outputs, right? So when we use sort of Gemini or ChatGPT, we know that they're not always correct. And, you know, lots of people are using them for sort of homework now, right? They're using them to do their homework. And it's really important that we think about whether, you know, are we accountable for the errors that are included in that work? So there are 4 paragraphs and they have to find the one error in each of them. And they have to correct that error if they can. So Ben, I know you had some thoughts about this top one, right?
I did, and thank you for mentioning that. I embarrassingly asked Mark the question, do jaguars exist in the Amazon rainforest? Because I thought maybe that was the error in that text, but Mark quite rightly told me jaguars do exist in the Amazon rainforest. So that wasn't the error, right? It was they were located in Antarctica.
Absolutely. So these errors are hopefully pretty obvious, but obviously Ben found that one a little bit tricky. But the idea here is that we have to check the outputs of LLMs, that we are accountable for what we do. They are a tool, as we've said throughout this, right? They're a tool to help us achieve things. They're not a replacement for our own accountability, right? We need to make sure that these things are correct.
Do you, Matt, can I just ask, do you expect students when they're like young people reading this, do you expect them to kind of know the answers already?
I hope that the answers are somewhat clear, but I think hopefully through sort of collaboration and working together, like we said before, they can find and correct the answers, and maybe they can just find what's wrong, but maybe don't know the correction. So hopefully we can help them sort of learn something there as well. Agreed.
I think that points back to the previous point, is we don't always know, right? Some of the media that we're served, you know, there's lots of things that I read on the internet. I don't have that domain knowledge to know whether they're right or not. So I think what we're teaching them here to be that, like, again, critical thinking, same thing. It's kind of checking your sources and getting second opinions.
Absolutely. So that's the second challenge. The third challenge is all around bias. So we know that machine learning and AI systems can have bias in them, and that bias can affect real people. And so their job in this one is to read a scenario, identify the type of bias based on that scenario, identify a possible explanation for that bias, and a solution. So these are all given to them, and they just need to match the bias to the solution and the explanation. Now, we give some guidance in the Educator Guide to introduce this concept of bias, but I think it's really important to reflect on the sort of fairness of AI tools as well, right? It's not just about us taking accountability or the transparency of where they've been used, but also whether the systems themselves are fair, right? Whether that's a good use of AI, and that's also comes into AI responsibility. Yeah, and hopefully you can, as I've said, you can notice that each of those challenges highlights these key concepts of transparency, accountability, and fairness, and really pulls them out. And it brings up some nice conversations, as we said, in a structured way, in a fun way. They're doing like an escape room to get points and find codes. And we think it's a really, really cool activity. Yeah, and then, yeah, I think it's really important to give them time to reflect on those inappropriate uses of AI tools and not think, you know, the idea here is that they're able to see them, correct them, get put in that seat of like being the people that point these things out, so that they sort of internalize that those are really inappropriate uses of AI tools and what the right way to use these things are. And that leads nicely into our second Unplugged activity, which is My AI Principles. So now that they've looked outward at some inappropriate uses, it's about looking inwards and coming up with some principles, some guidelines for ourselves that we are going to implement when using AI tools. So this Unplugged activity involves them starting by looking at some ideas of principles. So these come from the Alan Turing Institute. And these are the fast track principles that kind of cover fairness, accountability, sustainability, and transparency. So these are sort of society-wide principles for when we might use AI or how to sort of introduce AI ethically into parts of our lives. And we use these as examples for them to start looking inwards and think about what their principles would be. So they start with sort of taking some time on their own to sort of think about what they've covered in the session so far and work in groups to brainstorm some AI principles. Now, you might think 11 to 14-year-olds, are they going to know how to write like a good, actionable and specific principle? But don't worry, we in the Educator Guide include some examples of principles for educators to use to sort of prompt some thinking and get them writing sort of effective, actionable principles. Now, of course, we don't want these principles to just be done in isolation. So we also encourage people to go walk around and talk to their classmates about what they're thinking in their principles and what they're taking away from the session that they've done. And finally, to kind of come up with a shared view, right? In each class, we want them to create either a poster or a display that sort of has these guidelines on. So they are agreeing as a whole group how they are going to use AI.
And just jump in there, Mike. I really like this activity because I think it kind of really what we want young people to do is just challenge each other. Just go around and go, have you thought about this? Or like, not sure about that. Because that also models like a healthy workplace as well, right? Doesn't it? Where we're able to challenge each other and you know, give our own views, our own perspective on different things before we can come up with like this collective agreement about what the right route or path forward is.
Absolutely. And I think you've hit on that sort of second part here, right? It's like having these principles and finding the route through and navigating these tools is really important. And that we give young people the sort of foundation to build off of when they will see others doing the opposite, right? They will see examples of people using AI tools inappropriately. And so we need to give them these rock solid principles, this idea of a group are all coming together to make a better future with AI tools. That, you know, so we can be like those physicians that Amy was talking about. They're using the AI model to be more effective and not using it in some of the inappropriate ways that they've seen. Cool. So finally, as I said, we've got these 2 unplugged activities, but we also have these amazing discussion points. So if you're not going to do the unplugged activities, or if you've done the unplugged activities and you want to carry on these amazing conversations, we have some examples here for you, you to talk to young people about.
So, Mark, I think I've read through these discussion points, obviously, and I really like them. I think they could produce some like fantastic discussions. But I suppose the question that I've got for you is there's quite a lot of discussion points here. So have we got any guidance around that? And also, you know, like what are the right answers?
So I think you're absolutely not expected to use all of these. The idea is we wanted to give you a breadth of discussion so that you can pick ones that apply to your young people and are relevant to what's going on, or maybe some concerns that you have. I think throughout this session, hopefully you've seen that there is an idea of internal reflection, but also an idea of looking outwards and becoming an advocate for AI safety. So I think you can probably talk, you know, bring one in about, you know, if somebody uses AI to create inappropriate images, what should happen to them, right? So this is like, if somebody is misusing AI, what do we think the consequences should be, right? Have them really reflect on those consequences, particularly if I know there's lots of talk about sort of deep fakes and generating inappropriate images in schools. So I think that could be a good one to have in a safe environment that you've set up with these sessions beforehand. But then there's also, you know, talking about what safeguards that organization should put in place in their AI tools, and having that advocacy lens as well. And don't worry, we don't expect everyone to have all the right answers, especially if this is a new area for you too. So we also include some things that are important to draw out, right? So we talk about this idea that AI systems might be biased, that we should expect transparency from companies and individuals who design AI tools, but that is not where responsibility ends, that we also as creators have a responsibility for how we use AI tools.
And I think a really important factor with all of this is, and I kind of talked about it a little bit before, this topic of teaching young people about artificial intelligence is new to absolutely anyone. And we don't expect anybody delivering our resources to be AI experts, far from it. We've hopefully provided like all the guidance you might need to just guide young people and have these kind of conversations and let them explore these issues and their thoughts and feelings about it. So you don't have to be the industry expert. You don't need to know the ins and outs of how AI systems work to be able to like have these ethical conversations and discuss the kind of what kind of principles they should hold themselves to account to.
Yeah, amazing. Cool. Okay, well, those are resources. So I've been dying to bring Amy back to have a bit more of a conversation with our last sort of 10 to 15 minutes of this this webinar. So Amy, let's see if we can bring you back from behind the scenes.
Hi,
hello, Amy. I'm really glad to hear.
I'm learning a ton. I'm learning a ton too. This is amazing. I love having you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, we really, yeah. So I guess I wanted to, you know, from your perspective, as somebody who is inside one of these organizations working every day with AI tools, how do you think about the safeguards AI platforms should put in place to help users act responsibly, right? This isn't just about young people necessarily, but obviously that's what we're here to talk about, but users more generally. How do you think about it?
Yes. So I often use a framework that has alliteration. So hopefully it's helpful for people to understand. But we think about this of like, I think about it kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have protect, respect, and empowering of youth. At the bottom, we have the basis being we need to protect our users. In the middle, we have respect. And then at the very top, we have empower. And I'll kind of talk a little bit about what type of safeguards sit within each of those things. So when it comes to protect, that's like the very baseline. So that includes things like default safety and privacy protections for kids and teens. So the policies that are developed that consider the unique vulnerabilities and needs from both like a content testing and model training perspective, as well as things like transparency. And you've talked a lot about those in earlier discussions and the resources that you have, but making sure that we have just-in-time notices and reminders about the capabilities and limitations of these systems and how users should use them and not use them. And that should be done at point in time, but it also needs to be done throughout the product in different periodic reminders that make sense for their user journeys. Sometimes this is a hard balance for us as people who are actually building products. And so for those of you who may be developers in the room, or teachers and educators as well, like, we know that sometimes friction is necessary. So making sure that we're slowing folks down and making them think critically about these things, so that we can dissuade teens from doing inappropriate or misusing the products. But we also know that it can dissuade teams from using something different that may not be for them. So from a UX and product design perspective, this one's really tricky. So like, we don't want teens to go elsewhere and say the teenified version of something isn't for me. There's too many reminders and there's too many protections in place. But we do know that there's a really important balance to get right, which is creating the necessary friction while also creating the right experience for kids. And then that kind of leads me to respect. So again, talking about respecting kids and their families, we need to offer them choice and flexibility so they can decide what works best for them. So anything from controls, so parental controls for younger users or admins in school, we need to be able to provide things and settings that allow that flexibility. And I think that a necessary part of respect is also, and I can talk more about this, I think, later, about like going beyond the don't. So it's not respecting a child or a teen to just sanitize a product and say, sorry, you can't do that. I think companies really need to be considering what is the right way to respond thoughtfully and age appropriately within a boundary, so that we aren't just saying that answer that we built and designed for adults is not appropriate for you, and therefore you get nothing. So it's so much about both making sure that we're not including detrimental outputs, but that we're actually investing in creating proactively good ones. And I think that leads nicely into empower. When this is done right, kids and teens have age appropriate and delightful experiences, things that really can cater to their unique needs so that they can safely, grow and explore more of these things. But this also points more to some of the safeguards, like our literacy guides and in-product tools and supplemental experiences that we're building. They're not things that exist in isolation. We were required to do them not only as a company, but together as a community of the people who surround youth. But in practice, we all share those responsibilities. So I think tactically speaking, how to go about doing this, investing in research with children and parents and caregivers and AI experts, doing rigorous and ongoing model testing through the lens of a teen, and not over. I think this one, we often talk about making sure that we have privacy and data training protections in place. And yes, absolutely, but not overcorrecting to a point where we are excluding children from training our models, because to do so would be to ignore their existence. So yes, we need to absolutely disassociate personal and identifiable minor data, but not considering them in how we train our models would be a real gap. And so those are the types of things that I think about a lot.
I think that's my kind of analogy is such a simple analogy, so I apologize for oversimplifying it. But it's like, we know that there are some dangers, right, to young people using this technology, but there's dangers to crossing a road in a street, but we don't tell kids that they can't cross a road in the street. We just, as adults, help them navigate that. And if you're riding a bike, for example, we put might start off with some training wheels, and it's knowing when to take the training wheels off and support them along that journey.
That's right. I mean, I don't want to preach to a choir, because I think a lot of folks who are here inherently means that they're like, I don't want to go so far as to say tech optimists, but they're open to the idea that this technology has opportunity and for youth. And so, but just to remind, I think that point of like, there are real risks to being naive to the fact that this exists. And so if you go ahead and you say, no, I'm absolutely not going to let you use it, or I'm going to be hypercritical of it, you really run the risk that you are possibly not understanding the reality that our children and our teens are experiencing. And that's really important, because it might mean that you're, inadvertently not investing in the development of their future school skills. It's also ineffective, right? Like these teens are savvy. They know how to get what they want to get. But I think just like taking a beat and making sure that we're always opening the door to listen to them is very, very valuable.
Cool. So I actually have another question for you, Amy, if that's all right.
Mhm.
So what advice would you give to learners who are considering using an AI tool for schoolwork? I think you've touched on it a little bit, but what can they do to be responsible students and, you know, users of these AI tools?
It's like great. I mean, you all have touched on this so much today, so I'll do my best to add some unique value here, because I think what you've offered has been so actionable and so wonderful. Um, the top things for me are prompt generation 101. I would want to spend some time with youth talking to them about how to effectively use these things from a prompt input perspective. So much of what you get out of AI is what you put into it. And that is a learning curve and a journey. And so don't skip over the importance of navigating it via your own prompt generation trial and error. And to make that more actionable in practice for youth, you know, asking them to find a few ways. AI is touted as like it can do anything and it can help with all these things, but it can't. It does certain things for certain people. So I would encourage young people to find a couple of ways or a handful of ways that AI might be able to really help you, and then practice with it. Do that on repeat with it. It's like go deep in a few things versus going widespread in all the things, and that will really, I think, get their feet wet in a way that really allows them to practice. I think that I'd remind them that I get the balance that remaining critical is important, and you'll hear a lot of that, but just like being reminded to be critical is really baseless. And because what does that even mean if it's not prescriptive and actionable? And Ben, you talked about this a little bit, but like data shows us that children often don't have the cognitive or emotional capacity to distinguish between reliable and unreliable information. But if you even like throw that out the window, like us as adults who work in tech often lack that skill. That is really hard to do. So to just like go through and be like, yes, I know it gets it wrong. And I should be careful. Like be careful about throwing those just like one-liner lessons out there and ask yourself, do you really understand what that means? I think about this a little bit of like, you would make a fire escape plan with your family. You would think about it. You would practice it. You would trigger it when needed. So I maybe shouldn't be using a fire escape plan in this context, but like, it's a plan and you have to practice it is more of my point, which is what is your actionable way of addressing the risk of fallibility in AI models? And don't just let it sit there and be something that but you never do anything about. And so I think a lot of great resources were shared today in this forum, and then Google and other resources are there to let you think about that. But like make sure that you are thinking about what are my ways that I can do this, and go practice those out, test those out a little bit. Because at the end of the day, it's the user who's really going to be on the receiving end of criticism. If you are the one saying a bunch of information that, was it right? You're not going to be able to say, oh, well, the AI said this, like, reminding them that these are these things that are really important and reflect upon them. And so getting them involved and invested in wanting to do more. And then so I don't ramble. What is my last piece of advice? I'll give you 3. So in the context of school, a lot of conversations around the AI doing the work for you versus using the AI to augment how you do your work. Yes, sure, you can absolutely use it as a calculator in your long division class, but that's not what's going to get you ahead. I love kids because they care so much actually about how things work. They don't want to just be told, they want to be shown. And so I love doing this even with my very young kids, but I think it works really well with kids of all ages, which is talk to them about like how it scientifically impacts them if they don't use this thing to help them learn and do the work, instead do the work for them. So talk to them specifically about how brains develop intelligence, and take time to educate on the practice that brains need in order to learn, and acknowledge that shortcuts are there, but AI can be better suited as a tool and not a homework machine. So AI can be amazing to like create fun or engaging activities, can adapt to people's learning style, can build exercises and devices that make learning and concepts more enjoyable. So asking, hey, go experiment with that and do that is a really important thing that I would encourage, teens play around with as well, because that will actually start to show them the benefits of like using AI to support their journey, but not replace their journey.
And just to add to the first part of your answer, I think completely. I think this idea of young people learn to prompt, I think is really important. But I think it's part when we talk about prompting, it's about the initial kind of input. But I think also teaching young people, they're not assuming that young people know how to handle the output by default. You know, we have this idea of feedback literacy, understanding that feedback, how to handle it, and what to do with it to eventually get to the kind of the output that you're aiming for.
Yep, that's right.
Absolutely. And it's all these skills, right? All these skills that help people use. It's not just about telling people what not to do, it's telling people what to do as well, and how to get the benefits, right? Is like, I think it's easy when talking about AI safety, I think, to always focus on the sort of dangers and the don'ts, but let's also spend some time talking about the do's and how that can be really empowering. So thank you, Amy. That was amazing, honestly. And we could hear you talk about this for hours. So hopefully we can do another one of these at some point and get another hour out of you. Because that would be awesome. Amazing. Well, that brings us to the end of our webinar. I just wanted to, as one last reflection, is that this idea that responsibility for using AI tools well is shared. It sits with both users, especially the young people who are learning to navigate these tools, but it also sits with sort of developers, companies, and us as educators, right? To make sure that we are showing good practice, we're showing what to do, what not to do, but really just leading from the front and helping empower young people to make these decisions for themselves, because it is them that has to navigate this world at the end of the day. So these are my two key takeaways. We need to prepare young people to approach AI systems in a principled way, promoting these ideas of fairness, accountability, and transparency. And we also, that you don't need to be an AI expert to facilitate these conversations. All adults coming with an open mind, talking about how these systems are going to affect their lives, admitting when you don't know all the answers, I think is really good as well. So yeah, just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for joining us. I thank you, Amy, so much for offering us your expertise, especially so early in the morning where you are as well.
Thank you for having me, you guys. I really appreciate being a part of this wonderful event and community. So anytime.
Amazing. And yes, again, thank you, Ben, for your input, and everybody in the comments for sharing along with the conversation. Yeah, have a great day, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.